Hey, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Ches, Daf 18 of Masechta Ksubis. Debating, it's funny, you have all these like clothing over here. Like, I came to Chutz La'aretz and I didn't bring any clothing with me because all my clothing is old and torn. Did I tell you all this stuff? Anyways, so I went to the store to buy more clothes, to buy clothing, and I explained to them that I just came to the country, I don't have any clothing, and and that I need to kind of, buy like all new stuff. And so the people that they asked me if I had a place to sleep. Okay, I didn't realize that I sort of give off that kind of vibe. Okie dokie, well, anyways, but now the shipment came in, the package came in, and now I'm looking up, I went from like literally wearing my pajamas for the last 3 days to having all sorts of things over here. Baruch Hashem. Alright, well, anyways, today we're studying Daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ksubis. Yeah, it's nice, Apesha also, Apesha. This is like, oh my gosh, this is good stuff. This is like good Gemara stuff. You gotta use your cup a little bit, but not too much, just the right amount. It's very good. So, let's go weiter. So, we're on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and all the way at the top line. V'lesni moder Rabbi Yoshua ba'omer lachaver moni levisi mimcha ufaraitiv lecha shehu ne'emon. Friends, remember in the Mishnah, so Rabbi Yoshua had said that in a situation where Reuven says to Shimon, look, this field over here, it belonged to your father. And he's like, what? It was my father's? That means it's mine, right? And he's like, yeah, but I bought it from your father. So we say, Apesh also, Apesh hitir. So the Gemara wants to know, why did he have to give the case of the field and his father and that? Couldn't he have said, I don't know, what could he have said? Couldn't he have said, Velesni, let it say, Moder Rabbi Yoshua, the Rabbi Yoshua admits, Be'omer lachaver, that when Reuven says to Shimon, Moni livisi mimcha, I borrowed $100 from you, ufarati v'cha, but I paid it back from you. But I paid it back to you. Shehu nemon, that he is believed, right? So why don't we say that's an example of hapesha osar hu hapesha hitir? Why do we need the case of real estate? Just say, Reuven says to Shimon, I borrowed from you $100, but I paid it back. Well, because the continuation would then read, but if there are witnesses that say that Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon, and Reuven says, oh yeah, but I paid it back, Reuven would not be believed. If there are witnesses who say that Reuven owes Shimon $100, Reuven says, yeah, but I paid him back, the Mishnah would say that Reuven is not believed. However, the thing is, he would be believed. After all, but we hold that the halacha is hamalve es chavero be'edim, that if Shimon lends $100 or however much he lends to Reuven in front of witnesses, enu tzarich lefaru be'edim, Reuven does not need to pay it back in front of witnesses, and therefore, in the event that witnesses come and say, oh yeah, we were there when Shimon lent Reuven $100, if Reuven says, yeah, but I paid it back and I just didn't pay it back in front of you, then, he says, I paid it back without witnesses, so then he would be believed. So our Mishnah says, in our Mishnah, or let's say what our Mishnah does say, is that if witnesses say that this field belongs to Shimon's father, and Reuven says, yeah, but I bought it from Shimon's father, If Reuven says, I bought it from Shimon's father, Reuven is not believed. But if it were a case of not fields, but that witnesses say that Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon, and then Reuven says, but I paid it back, Reuven would be believed. So therefore it would not be consistent with our Mishnah. V'lesnei moder Rabbi Yoshua ba'omer lachavero Mone la'avicha biyode v'achaltiv pras shehu nemon. Woo! Kidoki. Why don't we say that the case in the Mishnah is talking about where, right, be'omer la'chavero, that Reuven says to Shimon, Moni le'avicha biyadi, I have $100 that belong to your father. Your father lent me $100. But I paid him back half. Sheunemon, and Reuven is believed. That if Reuven comes up to Shimon and he says, hey Shimon, I borrowed $100 from your father, but I already paid him back half, Reuven would be believed, and he wouldn't have to swear that he's telling the truth or anything like that. So, but aliba deman, but who would that be like? Aliba de Rabbanon ha'ami meshiv aveda have. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov ha'omer shvu boy. We're about to see a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the Chachamim. But basically, in this case, where Reuven freely offers to Shimon that he borrowed $100 from Shimon's father, but he paid back half of it, and if we're saying over here that Reuven is off the hook, he doesn't have to swear he's believed, well then it's like neither the Chachamim nor like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And that's because the Chachamim view this as a case of Hashavas Aveda, that Reuven is returning a lost object to Shimon. And therefore, not only in the case where Reuven freely offers to Shimon that he borrowed $100 but paid back half of it, but even if Shimon would sort of, I don't know if confront is the right word, but would approach Reuven and say, hey, what about that $100? And Reuven says, oh, I paid back half of it. Well, it's considered like Hashavas Aveda, and he wouldn't have to swear anyways, right? So even if when sort of it's shorshachut lefanecha, as we had said, I believe yesterday, that like even in a situation where, was it 2 days ago already? But right. That even in a situation where sort of Reuven is not freely offering this information, but that he was sort of approached about it, even in that situation, he would not need to swear that he's telling the truth, because we treat it like Hashavas Aveda. And if it's a Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would say that even when Reuven freely sort of shares this information, that he borrowed $100 from Shimon's father, but that he paid back half of it, he would have to swear. So therefore, if we want to say that our Mishnah is that Rabbi Yeshua is saying in our Mishnah that if Reuven offers to Shimon, or sort of says to Shimon that he borrowed $100 from his father, but he paid back half of it, he does not, right, Ne'eman, he's believed, he doesn't have to swear or anything like that. It's like neither the Chacham, because the Chacham would say not only when Reuven freely offers this information, but even if Shimon would approach him about it, still he would be believed and wouldn't have to swear, because it's like Hashavas Aveda. And if it's according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would say he sure does have to swear. So again, where am I? So V'lesnei moder Reb Yoshua b'omer lachavero monu lavicha biyodi v'achaltev pras shunemun. Let's say that Reb Yoshua admits that in the case where Reuven says to Shimon, I borrowed $100 from your father, but I paid him back, and he's believed, Aliba Daman, who would that be like? Aliba de Rabbanon, if it's according to the rabbis who say that it's like Hashavas Aveda, Ha'ami Meshiv Aveda Ave, they say that returning this money is like Hashavas Aveda, and not only when Reuven freely shares this information with Shimon, but even if Shimon were to approach him, he would not need to swear. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and if we're saying like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Ha'omer Shvu Aboy, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says he would have to swear in this case. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Paimim, there are times, She'odam Nishbal Tainas Atzmo, that a fellow swears even based on his own sort of taina, his own sort of doing, meaning, let's go weiter for a second. Ketzad, how is that? If Reuven comes to Shimon, and Reuven freely shares with Shimon that he borrowed money from Shimon's father, but that he paid back half of it, Harei ze nishba. Nonetheless, even though it is right, Reuven could have just kept his mouth shut. He didn't need to share this information with Shimon. But here he comes and he shares this information with Shimon that he borrowed $100 from Shimon's father, but that he paid back half of it. He has to swear. This is the example where somebody has to swear based on sort of his own free sharing of information. Whereas the Chacham say Eino Ella, whereas the rabbis say no, we just treat this like returning a lost object, and Reuven would not need to swear. So now, what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov does not hold of this concept that if somebody's returning a lost object, he doesn't need to swear about it. People don't want to swear. Swearing is not like a fun thing. You have to take out a Sefer Torah and swear. It's not, swearing is scary. It's not a thing that people want to do, and it would scare away people from doing Hashavas Aveda, from returning objects. And therefore, if it's like Hashavas Aveda, so then you wouldn't need to swear. So why is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov saying that Reuven does need to swear? Doesn't Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hold that somebody who's returning a lost object doesn't need to swear? So Omer Rav bitoyanoi koin. So Rav says, well, it's not exactly talking about a situation where Reuven is freely offering this information, so it's not exactly a situation of Hashavas Aveda. Rather, it's talking about where Shimon is approaching Reuven about it, but Shimon is a minor. Omar Mar, but didn't we say Einish Boin al Tainis Cheresh Shoyte V'Koin? But I thought that if Shimon was a minor, he wouldn't be able to make Reuven have to swear. I thought, right? We said Einish Boin, we don't swear. Reuven would not have to swear. Al Tainis Cheresh Shoyte V'Koin, in responding to the claim of a sort of deaf fellow, a foolish fellow, or a minor. So if we're saying that Shimon is a minor, then why would Reuven have to swear? My kohen gadol. No, what does it mean he's a minor? It means he's an adult. Huh? Well, if he's an adult, then why are we calling him a minor? Because relative to his father, he's a kohen. Okay, we say it, but really he's an adult. And because he's an adult, so Shimon as an adult is confronting Reuven about this $100 that Reuven borrowed from his father, and Reuven is saying that he paid back half of it, so in that case he would have to swear. If that's the case, Tainas Atzmo, Tainas Acherimi. That's not his own taina, it's somebody else's taina, right? Meaning, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov had said, if we back up about 10 lines, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov had said, Paimim shadim nishbal tainas atzmo, that there are times when a fellow needs to swear based on his own claim, that he comes and he freely provides information, and that leads to him having to now swear. But the thing is, if we're saying that it's talking about a situation where Shimon, as an adult, approached Reuven about it, well then it's not tainas atzmo, it's tainas acherimi. Reuven is not sort of freely sharing this information, he's responding to Shimon as an adult confronting Reuven about this information. So tainas acherim v'odas atzmo. So Gemara says, well, sure, Shimon is the one inquiring about it, approaching Reuven about it, but Reuven is the one admitting it. But kuli tainosa tainas acherim v'odas atzmo. Isn't every single time that there's a confrontation, one person sort of says, hey, what's the deal? And the other one admits it. So this isn't, unique. This isn't exactly a situation of tainas atzmo. This is a situation of, somebody being confronted. But he admits it. Every time somebody's confronted, they end up admitting it. Meaning, if they do admit it. But that's kind of like a standard thing. That's not unique. So, Elohocha b'derabba komiflige. Rather, the machlokes here between Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the Chachamim is based on the opinion of Rabbah. What's the opinion of Rabbah? Here's the opinion of Rabbah. Mipnei ma omer Torah mode miktsas hataino yishova. Friends, why does the Torah say that when a fellow admits 50%, he needs to swear? Right? If Reuven borrows money from Shimon, borrows $100 from Shimon, and then Shimon says, okay, Reuven, you need to pay me back. And Reuven says, look, I didn't borrow $100, I borrowed $50. So he's sort of partially admitting to what he owes. So the Torah says that Reuven needs to swear that is really the case. So again, mipnei ma omra Torah moda mikta satani yishava. How come the Torah says that if Reuven admits that he owes Shimon money, but only 50%, only half of it, Chazaka in Adam, so Yeshava, he has to swear. The reason is because Chazaka in Adam meiz panav bifnei bal chovo. Because the psychology here is that Reuven would not be so brazen as to completely deny that Shimon lent him money. Shimon lent Reuven money. Reuven needed $100. Shimon lent it to him. Reuven won't be so brazen as to say, I don't know what you're talking about. You never lent me $100. Psychologically speaking, Reuven really wanted to deny all of it. That's what he would have liked to. But the reason why Reuven does not completely deny that he borrowed money from Shimon is because he just doesn't have the guts. He doesn't have the brazenness to look at Shimon straight in the eyes and say, I never borrowed $100 from you. Now, uvechula by delay. Now, at the same time, Reuven may have wanted to admit to Shimon that he, in fact, did borrow the $100. By delay, the reason why he doesn't say, okay, so you know what? Meaning we said, okay, so ein adamei is panav b'fnei bal chov, right? That, Shimon lent Reuven money. Reuven doesn't have the sort of audacity to just look Shimon straight in the eyes and say, I never borrowed any money from you. Now, uvechula by delay. Now, Reuven would like to admit to Shimon that he borrowed the money. However, by delay, the reason why he didn't admit to Shimon, the reason why Reuven did not admit to Shimon that he borrowed $100 is because that way he can buy some time. V'savar, and he figured that I'll just buy some time until I'll have the money and then I'll pay him back. So meaning, Reuven knows that he borrowed $100 from Shimon. So why doesn't he admit that he borrowed $100 from Shimon? Well, because he doesn't have the $100 right now. So he figures, you know what? I know that I borrowed $100 from Shimon. But why don't I just say, look, I borrowed 50. And at least that way, pay back 50 for now. And then he'll approach Shimon in the future and say, when he has the money, and he'll pay him back for the other half. So this is the cheshbon that's going on in Reuven's head. Now that's not okay. Reuven's not allowed to do that. If he borrowed $100 from Shimon, he's got to admit that he borrowed the $100 from Shimon and work it out. Ideally pay him back right now. He can't just get away with saying that, I'll just admit to half of it. No, you can't do it. And because the Torah doesn't want him to do that, even though he might be tempted to, so the Torah says, make Reuven swear, so that, Reuven won't be so brazen as to say that he didn't borrow anything at all. And he'll admit that he did in fact borrow the $100. Now, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Sover, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who holds that in this case, when Reuven says that he borrowed $100 from Shimon's father, right? That he borrowed $100 from Shimon's father, but he paid back half of it. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that he has to swear. Well, that's because Sover Loshna Bov Loshna Bivno. It omeis that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that this, the same, just like it would apply true with Reuven and Shimon's father, it also applies true to his son, to Shimon. And just like Reuven would not be able to look at Shimon's father straight in the eyes and say that he didn't borrow any money, the same would apply to Shimon. He wouldn't be able to look at Shimon straight in the eyes and say that he never borrowed any money, and he'll admit to half of it, however, but we don't want him, anybody playing games, so we make him swear. And that's why we don't treat it like returning a lost object, but rather like a loan, and if you admit to 50%, he has to swear about it. Whereas the rabbis hold, whereas the rabbis say, look, he wouldn't be able to look Shimon's father straight in the eyes, who lent him the money, and say, I didn't borrow anything. But Shimon, Ruvain would be willing to look at Shimon in the eyes and say, I didn't borrow anything at all. Umidelohe is, and for the fact that he didn't do that, but rather he admitted at least to 50% of it, we could trust him, and we just view it as though he's returning a lost object, and he would not have to swear about it. Says the Mishnah, Ha'edim she'amu ksav yadenu hu zeh. So if you have a document, and on the document there are two witnesses, Reuven and Shimon are witnesses. Fine. Now Reuven and Shimon come and they say, Ksav yadenu hu zeh. Yep, this is our signature. Yep, we testified about this document. We know exactly what this is. This is our signature. However, aval anusim hayinu, we were forced. Ktanim hayinu, or we were minors at the time. Psulei edus hayinu, we were, let's say, slaves. We were people who were unable to be proper witnesses at the time. Hara'elu ne'amanim, they're believed because hapesha also hapesha yitir. They're coming and they're saying, yes, this is our signatures, but we weren't, proper witnesses at the time. So they, just like they're believed about the signatures, they're also believed to say that the signatures were also not valid. But if there are witnesses who are testifying that this is in fact their signatures, and now they're responding and saying, yes, but, we were minors at the time or whatever, or if they're able to produce another document that Reuven and Shimon had signed and say, look, you see, it's the same signatures, right? And that other document was sort of validated, so we know that the other document is valid, and we see from that document that it's the same signatures here as well, so we validate their signatures, and then they come and they say, yes, but we were forced, or whatever, well, in that case, they are not believed, because, it's no longer, right, it's now shor shachut lefanenu, it's no longer sort of just this information wasn't freely shared. Rather, it was in response to being questioned, like, hey, we know that these are your signatures, what's the deal? And they say, oh yeah, we were forced. In that case, they are not believed. Says the Gemara, says Rami Bar Chama, that in the Seifa of the Mishnah, when it says that, if their signatures are proven to be theirs, and then they say, yes, but we were forced, or we were minors, or whatever, they are not believed. So, that's only if they say that they were forced to sign the document for financial reasons, out of financial concerns. But if they were saying that, like, somebody gave that we got an offer we couldn't refuse, that somebody put a gun to our head and said if we don't, right, as Don Corleone he suggested to some fellow that either his signature or his brains are going to be on the document. So I imagine this would be a situation of anusim machmas nefashos, that if they got an offer they couldn't refuse, so then they are believed. Rava says, Kol kamine, what, can you just believe him? We have a document over here that that is clearly their signatures. We proved it. Witnesses testified that it's their signatures, or they proved it from a different document. It's clearly their signatures, and now they're saying, yes, but we got an offer we couldn't refuse. Look, once a fellow says, gives a certain testimony, you can't recant it. You can't just say something else now. And therefore, if we know that this document has their signatures on it, indicating that they're testifying about whatever the contents of the document are, they can't just say, yes, but we got an offer we can't refuse. Once they say one thing, they cannot retract it and say something else. And therefore, once we know that these are their signatures, they can't just say, yes, but we got an offer we couldn't refuse. And if you're going to say, look, when we say Kevin Shigid, Shuven, Chozor Magid, that once you say something, you can't just take it back and say something different. So maybe that's talking about if you said something, but maybe that wouldn't be the case, if your signatures are on a document. Maybe that's a different story. Maybe you can sort of, give an excuse, such as there was an offer they couldn't refuse. So Rish Lakish says, that Rish Lakish says that witnesses who are signed on a document, it's as though they gave their testimony in Bezin, so it should be no different than if they sort of verbalized their testimony. So Ella, Ki itmar aresha itmar. So rather, says Rava, no, this is not talking about the seifa. It's not talking about where their where their signatures are proven to be theirs, and then they say yes, but we got an offer we couldn't refuse. No, ella she'amru anusin ayunu machmas nefashos. Rather, it is talking about. Wait, did I skip? Ella aresha itmar hare'elu ne'emonin. That when we say that, when the witnesses say yes, these are our signatures, but we were anusim. So Amaram Barchama says Barcham Loshanu Ela Shamu Anusin Hayinu Machmas Nefashos. They're only believed, right, when they say sort of in one breath, yes, these are our signatures, but we were forced. That's only if they got an offer they couldn't refuse. Aval Amru Anusin Hayinu Machmas Mamin. But if they say, look, we had to sign it because we got some kind of there was some kind of financial implication to signing this document. Well, then Ein Ne'emanin, then we don't believe them. My time, how come? Because a fellow can't make himself into a nudnik. That kilu, if they say, yes, these are our signatures, but, we were forced into doing it for financial purposes. Well, then they're basically making themselves into nudniks. They're making themselves into rishayim. And people are not able to incriminate, right? A fellow is not able to incriminate himself. And therefore, we cannot believe them that they only signed it out of sort of financial necessity. Friends, that was Daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ksubis. So another interesting daf over here about a pesha osor or a pesha hitir. We gave different suggestions about maybe other situations of a pesha osor or a pesha hitir. We got into the concept of modeh b'miktzah satayna yishova. That when a fellow admits to sort of half of financial liability, so he has to swear that is in fact the case. And the question is, how does that trickle down to the second generation? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that just like a fellow would be unwilling to look in the eyes somebody who lent him money and say, I didn't borrow anything at all, but he would be able to say, look, I borrowed half. So that says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that applies not just to the father who he borrowed it from, but also to the child. And therefore, Reuven needs to swear when he says that he paid back half of it, whereas the Chacham say no, it applies to the father but not to the child, and therefore they would not need to swear. Reuven would not need to swear. He's treated like Hashav Saved, returning a lost object. And then we got to a new Mishnah where we said that if witnesses testify about their signatures but say that they were forced to sign, so then says Ram Barchama, that's only if they were forced to sign for financial gain, for financial reasons. But if they were forced to sign because they got an offer they can't refuse, well then we can believe them that they only signed it because they had an offer they couldn't refuse. Friends, that was Daf Yud Ches of Masechta Ksubis. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.